As I've covered my recent experience with familiar feelings of depression, I feel that it is really important for me to also capture where I'm at now and to try and articulate the difference, because I find that in a lot of conversations with friends and family, my go-to response is to say that it's incredibly hard to articulate how there can be a shift from a feeling of depression to feeling incredibly peaceful and joyful. And that is quite alien to our general understanding of the human experience, of emotions, of struggle. So in this video, I'm going to try my best to articulate why I believe that occurs, and the role of meditation and the role of awareness in that process. There is already a fundamental shift in how I feel. I'm much lighter in my sense of being. I feel an incredible sense of inner peace and calm. I feel very connected to my meditation practice and a feeling of presence. And even a sense of joy at my experience without having to really do much to experience that. Circumstantially, things look very similar to how they were just a few weeks ago. With a spiritual practice and with a growth in awareness, you learn to view experiences, thoughts, feelings, sensations as the observer. So you have a greater awareness that this is not who I am. It's an experience, it's phenomena that you might label depression, you might label the dark night of the soul, but it's not who you are. For me, for where I'm at on my path, the challenge occurs when I get caught up and I forget that it isn't who I am. I do believe to some degree there's a necessity in getting caught up, because clearly the depression had a message for me. Right? Clearly, this overwhelm was pointing me in a direction of where I was not aligned, of certain circumstances in my life that needed a slight adjustment, things that my conscious mind wasn't aware of that were surfacing. So the role of the depression in this sense was just to highlight from my unconscious mind into my conscious mind certain areas that I needed to become aware of. This is very organic, and the organic process of this, if we don't resist it, and I've learned over the years to not resist, because in the past I would have pushed these feelings away. I would have distracted myself through drugs, through entertainment, through binge eating, through partying, through sex, through any of these egoic ways that we look for that dopamine hit. I don't actually have so much of that in my life now for the way that I've cultivated a meditation practice to help. My source of refuge is in meditation. I don't drink. I'm very careful with what I eat. I'm careful with how I consume information, like social media, phone usage, all of these things. So what that means is that when I'm presented with shadow stuff from my unconscious, it is there to be seen and it's there to be felt, and it is at times overwhelming. When these things present themselves, if they're allowed to fully flourish and if they're allowed to follow their natural cycle, once they integrate into the conscious mind, once they're understood, then they dissipate. So for me, and actually what inspired this was a conversation with a friend very recently. He kind of said, or at least implied that it's a bit disheartening that for where I'm at on my spiritual path, I still have these experiences. And I felt a response, an intuitive response when she shared that I guess was a feeling of being misunderstood or wanting to highlight the difference, because the way that I experience quote unquote depression now is completely different from in the past. In the past, I would have been stuck, I would have resisted, I would have numbed myself from the experience. I would have resigned myself to the label, this is depression, I am depressed. I wouldn't have inquired and sought to understand what the message was. But not least, I wouldn't have had so much access to a greater level of awareness that could step back and view the situation objectively, or from a non-attached but compassionate point of view. So the shift for me, very in the lived experience, what actually happened was that there was a building up of different situations, different circumstances that I was essentially aware of to some degree but pushing aside. I was minimizing them. I was downplaying the impact that they had on my psyche. And that includes moving to an entirely different part of Berlin, moving away from the community that I do have here, feeling isolated, which is also ironic because I seek and thrive in solitude. So there was cognitive dissonance around that as well. As well as what direction I'm going in with Mind That Ego and the direction I'm going in life generally, plus turning 30, I've covered all of this stuff in the video. But these were all themes that I could no longer ignore. And around that time as well, a few other situations provoked a strong emotional response. So I had the circumstantial situation that I needed to confront, and also my own ability to bear witness to certain, I call them traumas, or just felt experiences in the body that I've always found difficult in confronting. Carl Jung rightly points out that what we resist persists. So when I was able to just surrender to the process and to surrender to these difficult feelings, and then strategize when necessary and feel when necessary, then they shifted quite quickly. But what I do want to point out that is absolutely essential to this quite rapid shift is my meditation practice. Because without my meditation practice, I don't know how I would be able to shift my state of consciousness. I'm going to be producing more videos around state and the way that affects our entire perspective on life and ourselves. But what I put it down to is being fixated on a problem, being fixated and entangled and attached to the feelings of quote-unquote depression. I'm feeling that that's what I am, and then becoming the greater awareness behind that. And I'm fortunate enough that at the stage of my meditation, I'm able to kind of drop in to that space on the mat. Interestingly, I'd started to neglect my meditation practice. I think I was afraid of the abyss, and this happens. There are cycles where I'm feeling difficulty, and I develop an apprehension towards meditation because I'm afraid of what might come up. But I didn't realize that generally the fear itself is an illusion, and I sit in meditation, I settle, and I connect with a feeling of oneness, and that is incredibly calming and soothing. And I actually did have a meditation very recently where that profound shift occurred, and that is thanks to a practice that has been cultivated over some time. But it's also, it's testament to the power of mindfulness, and for me, a reminder that there is an organic life cycle to all these inner experiences, and a lot of the time it's the resistance that keeps them hanging on. I always remember from The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle's groundbreaking book on the power of presence. I think it's The Power of Now or A New Earth, I can't remember, but he mentions the way that ducks respond when they have conflict. When a duck has conflict, fights with another duck, they meet, they have a fight, there's a certain level of aggression. Then when they separate, they just shake off the aggression, shake off the experience, and then they're calm, they're present again. They're not developing a narrative or a story about that conflict and carrying that with them for the rest of the day in the way that we do. Not even for the rest of the day, but that story might continue for weeks or months or years or an entire lifetime. So I feel that through the practice of connecting with presence in a meditation practice, you're able to let go of any stories, and you're able to feel that very organic and natural arise and then cessation of inner experiences. Every emotional experience that you have has a message behind it. It's trying to communicate something to you from a deeper part of yourself, right? And for me, when I was first, aware of this, when I stopped resisting and I sought the learning in that emotional distress, then it started to subside. And it was only when I followed my intuition and applied a few tweaks to my day-to-day, to my mindset, but also certain habits that I'd neglected, I was then overcome quite quickly, really, with a sense of calm and a sense of ease and a sense of joy. Will that remain? No, it absolutely will not remain. It will change. My grounding in that state of consciousness, in that state of presence, increases the more I practice meditation. But I'm still really early on my journey. I've been meditating for, I think, close to 7 or 8 years now, and this is a lifeline. It is a lifeline. That was a Freudian slip. It's also a lifetime of practice. So I have an immense amount of gratitude for a practice that provides me with refuge and has also taught me, above everything else, to acknowledge the emotional experiences that I have, to understand that there is something greater at play, and for the individual, I believe that to be a deeper wisdom that is always flickering into our conscious mind, sending us messages. This deeper wisdom tends to know what we need before we're conscious of that. Being able to familiarize and build a relationship with presence, and that's something I'm incredibly fortunate that I have the refuge of a spiritual practice, a meditation practice that shifts these experiences organically. I feel like they're there to be felt, they're there to be integrated, they're there to be learned from, and then just like that duck, shake it off. I don't know what that shake was, but it felt it felt very not duck-like. So I hope that there's learning in this, because I wasn't going to capture this change in my state, but I'm finding that the more I delve into my own psyche, the more that my spiritual practice unfolds, the closer I get to the truth of how I respond to emotion and the greater awareness behind it, but perhaps it becomes more unconventional. And I find that, having these conversations, it's really interesting for me to know that there is a certain expectation. If someone's in a certain frame of mind, there's an expectation that might be, alarm bells are ringing, or it's there to stay. But actually, my recent experiences of depression, and I don't subscribe necessarily to that label, but that is my background. That's something I'm still conscious of. That is my background. That's where I've come from. My experiences are organic, and I think in the past I've resisted a lot. I've shut down emotionally, and then they've become chronic rather than a natural rise and fall of the experience. So the takeaway for this video is I guess a form of inspiration in terms of what I've actually got from my meditation practice. There is a strong area of interest. I get asked a lot at events and even through friends and family if I still experience depression. And the more you move into the direct experience of the psyche, the less these labels fit, and the more rapid things can change. If you look at the weather, you might have a sunny day one day and then it might be storming the next. So it's important to note that through a meditation practice, in my experience, I've been able to shift back into a calmer, more balanced, clearer, more clarified state of being in quite a short space of time. So I hope that this video has been useful. And do ask if you've got any questions about this. I really would be happy to answer, because looking at depression through a lens of higher consciousness is something that I think we need to do more of, because it shows that the psychology of it is not to be taken lightly, but actually a spiritual practice can provide a lot of solace for when depression does arise.